Nailed it. Hey everyone, welcome. I want to start by looking back to Josh's keynote and the phrase that he, from Xerox PARC, that he put out there. Like, in 30 years, it would be ridiculous if we didn't have a personal server, right? But this server is not just like an email server, it's quite possibly hooked up to an AI that knows everything about you. It might be hooked up to your brain, it has your password, it has your crypto keys. And somehow, I'm yet sleeping well at night, knowing that that stuff is safe. How is that possible? How can we get to that place where, like, we can trust this device with everything about us? It essentially has, you know, the nuclear option over all of us, and yet I know that it's going to do what I want, and it's not that much more insecure than the average things that I use today. What do you think?
It's a low bar. It's a low bar.
Yeah. It's like, well, yeah, maybe we're not dreaming big enough, but, like, you know, if we can beat what we have today, amazing. If we can dream really big, then, you know, how do we get there? Where do we get to?
Well, at minimum, we wouldn't be spewing our data into various forms of advertiser aggregation networks that let people track you everywhere you go and have extremely targeted preferences around your, like, shopping and around every web search that you do, etc. That would be a start.
Yeah. Just the fact that it's self-sovereign.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that's a pretty far distance from where we are today. And the way you get to something like that is by starting now and having incremental progress and having some sort of measurement metric of how much closer we're getting to the point as we go. I'm not worried about, like, some sort of getting stuck on a local maximum there, but I think the biggest problem we have today is we don't really have a measurement of how secure something is. It's sort of vague. There are best practices, there are things we can do, and then there are these sort of weird consequences that might happen at some point in the future of perhaps an existential loss of a protocol getting hacked for hundreds of millions of dollars, or all of the data of the most sensitive data of the largest government in the world getting turned over to its adversary, things like that. So there's not really a way to measure how much closer we're getting to this point. So until we have a way to measure, we're going to have a hard time getting there.
That's interesting in terms of measurement. I think that there's a potential world where we end up treating security as something that's occurring continuously, as opposed to something that's occurring, as you're saying, like, discretely on some, like, Poisson process where you have some random chance of something happening to you at some point in the next 12 months or 18 months or whatever. I think that, you know, obviously a lot of AI is bullshit, but I think that one actual interesting use case here is around basically combinatorial use of existing malware suites on a consistent basis to red team your own things continuously, as opposed to needing to have that potentially occur to you occasionally.
Yeah. I mean, people already do this on the adversary side. If they're, say, a spammer, they run all the mails they're going to send out through the spam filters to see if it'll get caught or not. They do test mailing. So on the defensive side, we could do the same thing.
Mm.
I think we all agree that Urbit is particularly well situated by design up front to be directed towards this goal. It's supposed to be, I mean, everybody's seen the t-shirt. It's supposed to be tiny, and its telos is, you know, to freeze into this, you know, minimal, perfect, sufficient. Obviously, if you can achieve that, then you're well on your way. I'd actually be curious to hear from Rikard or Ryan, their reaction to the claim that security is just, or maybe almost just, correctness.
Yeah. The number of times I've seen something where a system was formally proven, or even the weaker version of it where an audit has been done on, say, a smart contract in cryptography or in a cryptocurrency system, and yes, that was not where the vulnerability was, but it's some peripheral case of our code is great, but we apply it, we push it, and we've got the old data sitting there on chain, and the new code and the old data lead to vulnerability and lead to massive loss, or users have a different expectation of how the system actually works than how the code was designed, so the formal proof of correctness doesn't actually apply, all sorts of things like that. So I think it's a broader risk. The basic rule is the attacker doesn't really have to follow any of the rules, so if you have some piece of the system that's really hard to defeat, they'll pick another piece.
Yeah, I mean, what I notice is a lot of errors come out of all the implicit assumptions. So like I really make a point when I do crypto audit, smart contracts audit, and I really try to make a point of making sure that my starting point is like this is perfectly secure. The system is perfectly secure, and then outline all the assumptions under which that's true. And like over the last couple of years, one thing I really often have to put in there, assuming that the dev team doesn't really just screw you over because they actually still have admin keys, or assuming that this thing doesn't get updated or governance gets screwed in some way, right? And it gets increasingly like asinine that have the things you have to start putting into the assumption sections. Because what I find too is that as people get used to something working, like, oh, it hasn't been attacked for a while, then everyone just starts putting their stuff there. It's like the analogy of like, why do we have flood myths? Well, it's because like if you just don't have them for a couple of generations, people are going to start building their houses closer and closer and closer to the flood that overruns every 100 years, and then they all get swept away, and that happens again. So yeah, I don't know. It's you gotta like people get very, very complacent very quickly.
Yeah. So I was.
So the question is how you get around that, like, because once something works, people are just going to say, oh, now it works well enough. We can just break a bunch of security assumptions if it can give me some features better, faster, whatever, right? And the whole migration to the cloud, you can argue that that's sort of a version of that, where like I'm going to give away my data and I'm going to give away all my control if it actually means that I can get some benefit. And I haven't really seen anyone around me get screwed by that yet, so it's probably fine, right?
It's amazing how fast people adjust to what seems to be the current reality. Like what has been the case for the last probably 5 years in cryptocurrency is that it's almost impossible to succeed. The hardest part of the attack is exfiltrating funds and getting real benefit from it, because all the systems are essentially fully traceable. There's intermediaries that are fully monitored, everything else. It's very, very difficult to take even 10 million, but especially 100 million plus worth of stolen funds and turn them into spendable funds. That is probably not going to be the case for all that much longer, given ZK technology, given breakdown in geopolitical relations where there are large trading blocks that really hate the other ones and are actively at war with them. So they're not going to cooperate on a cryptocurrency trace of one of their nationals. So a lot of these assumptions that is hard are probably no longer going to be valid, but people won't they won't update their beliefs until they get hacked.
Yeah, and on that point, one thing I'm curious about, like if you try to think, 30 years ahead in time, what kind of technologies do you think are going to come around that sort of, not specifically building on Urbit, but like I'm thinking like very, very efficient CK circuits with like CK hardware, things are very optimized. Fully homomorphic encryption is one of those things that's like, seems like, it's always around the bend, but in 30 years it might actually work really well. Are there any like technologies that you anticipate are going to be there in 30 years that you can just offload some of the security assumptions to? Like someone said here, like, oh, you're always going to have to decrypt for compute. Like, hey, maybe in 30 years that's not true. Are there any other like technologies that you see coming like down the pipeline, if you can imagine, a few decades from now, that you think are going to be integral to that?
A thing that I think is necessary, may not exist in 30 years because I'm not that optimistic, is hardware that's trustable all the way to the hardware. And right now we certainly don't have that. The closest thing we have is probably like Precursor and some of the RISC-V stuff and some of the other stuff that people are working on there, but there's really nothing that I would say I trust. You hand me an instance of it and I can non-destructively audit this and prove that it's working the way it should. The scariest thing right now in a lot of parts of security is these boxes, these HSM boxes, the hardware security modules, which are designed as black boxes, and you have to trust them, and they're built by people that you don't know, that you may not really have any real reason to trust, yet you're required to use them and required to trust them, and yeah.
Yeah, I think another interesting component there on the hardware is in the fact that SIM cards and mobile phones at least in almost all major phones, have root access around the, in other words, the modem of the phone has root access and control over the entire phone hardware and processor. This is not what you would conventionally expect, but in fact it's true. I believe, and I may be mistaken here, but I believe that one of the more recent iPhone iterations was one of the first widestream adopted phones that actually didn't have this being the case, which I found very surprising.
Yeah, I think that was probably the 11 or the 10 or something like that.
So.
So it's a few years ago, but yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, that's interesting. Aside from just trusted hardware, I think another interesting angle here is frankly that ZK in many ways changes the question, at least with adequate security of the underlying primitive, in the same way that, of course, with a hash function, there's always the caveat of, well, hash functions introduce all these beautiful things if you trust the underlying primitive. Yeah, and so with ZK, the versatility far outstrips what you get with hash functions, and Lord knows we've been able to take hash functions and the abilities they've given us extraordinarily far. And the fact that we're just about to start seeing ZK proofs be truly practical. Of course, for a few years now, it's been perennially, 2 years away. Well, in my view, it's here. It's already here. And I think that that's not particularly controversial. It's just not in widespread consumer use cases. And so I think that with full ZK proofs, I think that it actually becomes possible to start reducing the problem of security to precisely what you two were zeroing in on at the beginning of this conversation, which is to a question of semantic meaning, as opposed to a question of, did the computer do what I asked it to?
I do think the hardest problem of computer security has mostly been solved, which is probably a very controversial thing to say. For a long time, like in the 90s, early 2000s, no one cared about security because for the vast majority of users, there was no real consequence to anything happening bad with their computer. Worst case, they'd have to reinstall the Windows 95 install on their computer or whatever else. Now, people do see real losses when they get hacked. They see their hospital gets locked up and extorted for ransomware. They see actual pain from their personal files being leaked online. They see all sorts of stuff like that. And to the degree that people, individuals and especially businesses, are actually motivated to care about computer security and have for probably the last 10, 15 years, that is a huge change from how things were, and that'll lead to a lot of this technology happening. Like, technology will evolve when there's a function that forces it to evolve. The biggest problem we have now is people are willing to spend a lot of money, willing to put a lot of effort into solving this, but they don't really have a way to measure that they're getting anything for any given dollar that they spend. So we now have a different problem, but it is at least a more solvable problem.
And I think that, that's where we are with Urbit now, right? Like, for most people, like if my Urbit got hacked and like it all got leaked or I lost control of it, it's my ship doesn't like run my life yet, right? But if we look into the future, then it might, or like some personal server might. And the question is, can you get there without going through the pain of the 90s and the early aughts? Because that was painful. I don't know. What's the foundation's security like? How do you look towards security? What things do you think is like most important in the coming years? What's the main focus right now to avoid that?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the nearest term, the highest priority is really the application model itself, the security model as applied to applications and to updates, because full disclosure. The door is wide open right now. You install an application, the application can do anything that your ship can do. It can basically, it can reinstall the kernel, so by definition it can do anything else. It can change any protocol that you're running. Every application has root. This is very much like DOS style. Now that's actually, significant work has been done on that, and there is a full user space permissions implementation, including sort of like iOS style user prompting and capabilities, access control, these sorts of things. But Urbit itself, its fundamental constraints bring an interesting twist to this problem and make it quite difficult. The whole thing, it's clearly not done, and it clearly won't be done for some long period of time. And so maybe the most important property of Urbit at any point in time is its upgradability. Right? You can replace any component of it, and that is metacircular. It's bootstrapped. The machine upgrades itself. Well, when you apply this to a security model, you get into some very subtle chicken and egg problems, because the new model needs to be intelligible from the perspective of the things running in the old model, because you have to be able to approve the updates that may involve changing the model, trickling down recursively through the layers of the system. And so that problem in particular has become the focus of the user space effort, and the rest of it, which is done and works, is on the shelf, barring that problem being solved. And that's sort of a good segue into the more general pattern of this problem, which is to be contrarian. Everything we said at the beginning is true about Urbit being an incredible foundation on which to build a highly secured, high assurance personal computing environment. But it also brings its own unique kind of difficulties to it. And the upgradability is, in sort of both directions, contributes to this, because at most layers of the stack, a certain amount of backward compatibility is either mandatory or will become mandatory. If you get your updates over the network and you always have to be able to update, that means that you have to be able to keep speaking the old network protocol, even if it is found to have problems. There are similar things with jets, which is how we accelerate NOC, and of course, NOC, has such absurd asymptotics that you can't really do algorithmic complexity analysis. And when it comes to something like, say, timing attacks, you need enforcement of the fact that you have a jet that, ideally you can match the jet in constant time, but also the jet itself needs to be in constant time. And that kind of security analysis is really punching through layers of abstraction in a way that is very different from other systems. Normally you can just mandate, right? It's going to work in this way, it's going to use this library, we're going to link this thing, all of these, but we have some unusual layers of abstraction here. That whole system security analysis requires you to really to punch through, and then the self-bootstrapping and sort of metacircular properties of the system expose you to certain risk that you could just sort of define out of existence in another protocol, where it's like, well, if you have a problem, you're just gonna orphan the protocol. And it's like, well, that's not really an option. We have a global network, it has continuity. This is how you get updates, even if it's known to be weak, it's still gonna be there. So I think that context is important when you're thinking about the question of security given Urbit's technological choices. The flip side is truly we should, we have not a measurement by any stretch, but we have a kind of criteria that tells us that we're on the right direction. If the most important thing is simply reducing the size and complexity of the system that we ship, it's very easy to look around the system, look at the actual system itself and the source code and say, this is not there, and this thing as such, you're not going to get it there. I have no hesitation saying, the application sandbox, we can do, policy-based access control on that. But to make strong promises about that, the whole thing needs to shrink dramatically, because that model is just, anyone who's developed applications on user space can tell you that this model is very difficult to reason about. The subscriptions in general is what I'm talking about there. And recently I've been working on the next revision of Urbit's networking. And so I've been simultaneously looking pretty deeply into other projects and also looking pretty closely at what we have. And I also have no hesitation saying Urbit's network as it's implemented today is simply too complicated, making strong statements of security that are not theoretical, but that are actually about the machinery itself. The machinery has to be drastically simpler than that. We just found a surprising little bug that looks in the system like it should actually be impossible. It's the combination of the forwarding logic and this asynchrony around discovering keys for other people, and we would ending up in a situation where we were queuing packets to ourselves as we were trying to forward them to someone else. We didn't exclude ourselves from the routing list, and I don't think there's any security implications to this, but it's a staggering result because you look at the code and it clearly shouldn't be possible. It was the combination of several different factors plus a bug fix 4 months ago that all of a sudden removed a separate invariant that prevented us from hitting this code path. And if we want
that's possible, then what else is possible? What else are we
exactly,
doing, right?
Exactly. If we want to be able to make strong claims, we have to be able to have much higher confidence that when we look at this machinery, it's actually doing what we think it's doing. And I don't think that's viable unless, to quote the original introduction of Urbit to the world, it's moronic.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Zorp is also like starting from knock, right? Like, because it's a very simple system and trying to build like something simple and simple to reason about while still being very powerful. So I'm curious, what's your general strategy towards security within the company? What kind of like, dumb manual processes of like, 2 or 3 reviews on every pull request, like that kind of thing, all the way over to like, tooling, formalisms. What's your general approach that makes you feel reasonably confident that you're going to come out with something reasonably secure?
Yeah, so our general process around security up to this stage has been primarily one of just exhaustive unit testing and simultaneous, basically just really rigorous, at the very least at the algebraic level, analysis of the underlying primitives that we're dealing with, such that we can get just very, very structured from first principles, more or less combinatoric and number theoretic proofs around the idealized security of the code. Now, that being said, this is generally talking about the idealized security of the underlying model, as opposed to being of necessarily the code in practice. And so we have been, of course, discussing things like, this is how we can build an equivalence between some particular, say, class of polynomials and evaluations upon them of basically deterministically generated randomness. I mean, the term here, of course, is to be more or less simulating randomness via something called a Fiat-Shamir transform, where you have a specified deterministic set of inputs, and then you run a hash function over it, and you get something that is entropic in nature, or just difficult to predict in terms of the output. And so the notion that we've been really working with is a little bit unique from the Urbit question per se, insofar as you can't really, at the very least, no one's come up with a wonderful framework for it yet, say write an algebra over the correctness of, say, like something like vain invocations or something like that. Though perhaps it would be interesting. Maybe it would be possible with the abet and abed pattern, my least favorite core pattern within the system. What do you think? Is there an algebra?
Is there an algebra?
Yeah, for
vain invocations. That is a question I will defer on. But there's one more thing I wanted to say about just the way that we're thinking about this more generally, and that's so we cover short-term efforts, and then like the yardstick for the longer term, like they just have to be getting simpler, and then sort of where the rubber meets the road in a much more conventional sense is we ship a runtime. That is a very large piece of software that is written in C. It includes, an event log and, a memory persistence system, a snapshot system. It includes, an allocator or several allocators. It includes an interpreter or, in fact, several interpreters and so on. And we have to be able to treat those things with confidence and sort of solve the normal, or say 90s style, de-risk the 90s style security vulnerabilities in order to get Urbit to the level where we're talking about, the forward-looking vulnerabilities that you're talking about, which really are the combinatrix and incentives of the ecosystem and these kinds of things. And my view, which I will admit is not widely shared, is that that kind of systems engineering is actually just incredibly difficult, and the tooling is kind of a false god. I don't believe in the borrow checker, with all due respect. And I think you have to be paranoid, you have to test very aggressively, you have to fuzz. So far, we're scoring about 1.5. So we're definitely paranoid. We review very carefully. Everybody who's working on VER works quite closely together. We jump on calls, and over time, we've taken more and more care, just in general, that we're establishing good patterns of buffer management, and we're carefully validating lengths, and we're doing these very, very basic C programming practices. We've done some unit testing, but in general, these things are nasty and very difficult to mock. And I think we will get the most benefit out of the generative, instrumentation-driven fuzzers, AFL, these kinds of, there's newer frameworks now. And to me, that's table stakes before we start to make any claims. That's the way to treat that code seriously. Now, of course, there's kind of a pincer move going on here because, just prior to this talk, Edward Amsden of Zorp was giving a status update on the Aries runtime, and including a demo of that running. That's happening. That's quite close. This, of course, is written in Rust. It has a different set of trade-offs on these questions. At the same time, it extends the domain of security risk in a different way because that project is fundamentally a compiler. And so, risks can be generative and get much further in that kind of environment than they can in a very, dumb, straightforward bytecode interpreter like VER. And all I can say is, there's strength in numbers. We'll come at this from other sides, but I think I don't believe that the language level security can actually help us at that level. But I would be curious to get your impression.
Everyone turning to me like, no, I'm not working very much with formal methods and language level security. It's like, well, it's far from a silver bullet, and it's. Well, I guess it's a silver bullet in theory, and then it usually doesn't even fire. It just kind of blows up in your face most of the time. But yeah, in general, what you always have to advise people is that culture of security. Being paranoid is the first thing. It's when I was in college, I decided right away. Before I went to college, I decided I'm not going to be an engineer. I don't want to be an engineer, and then you start running into enough problems, so God damn it, I'm going to have to learn it. I'm just going to have to start solving this. And then I was doing computer science, and I'm not going to go into security because those people seem paranoid. and then you walk around, you feel fine, and you start asking oh, and how does this work? And your eyes start bulging when someone explains it, and you're God damn it, I'm going to have to get into security to deal with this because otherwise I can't sleep at night, right? But this paranoia and this culture that people in security have, I think is really important because if you look at the ecosystems of web apps and everything, oftentimes when something breaks, everyone in security who works actively with security go yeah, of course it was going to break. It was frail as hell. It was only focused on features and it didn't really think about first principles and so on, right? Which brings me obviously to app developers. Right? Because at the end of the day, you gotta have some sort of culture of security also for the people who are developing apps. Because even if the kernel is perfectly secure and someone builds a really nice password manager on top of it, and the password manager just shares my password if someone asks nicely and say they're me, across the network, then it doesn't matter how tight the kernel is, right? And well, putting it mildly, I'm not super impressed with the level of testing and security-mindedness you see in app development all the time. There's a lot of this meme of, oh, it's Hoon, so it's functional, so it's secure, some weird transitive property that's just seems insane, right? Oh, sorry?
That's just algebra.
Yeah. Of course, how can it be wrong? It's algebra. No, but like, how do you think like you can get that going in Urbit? Because you also don't want to stifle people's creativity. Like, there's always this push and pull between how do I make it secure versus how do I make it usable, right? The classic example being the sysadmin saying we're going to have a really strong password, and someone says that's really hard. But if I write it on a post-it note and it's like slap it on the screen, then like everyone's happy. They think, right? And the same thing happens obviously with app development. If there's like some important security feature that's put in place, someone's going to come up with a way to circumvent it because it's annoying. So like, what would you do to like really instill a culture of security for Urbit? What do you think like maybe the foundation or like people building, you're going to build an blockchain, like people are going to start building stuff on it, and at the end of the day, people say Ethereum's insecure because someone is writing bad smart contracts and people are getting hacked all the time, right? How do you get to a point where the things that people build on top of your thing is also secure, regardless of how like well your kernel works? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The thing I like is, because I work in insurance, I get to work in and look at things across a lot of different projects, and I don't need to go as deep into each one of them to be a developer in something to see all the problems with it and fix things. One of the things that universally seems to be the best way to get good security technology deployed is to make it the easiest way to do something. So from a developer's perspective, if a library is available that will make dealing with passwords or authentication in a self-contained, really secure, easy to use way is easier than a bad library, they're going to use the good library. And if it also happens to work better for end users, then the users will be happy with that. So I think I would focus on making a reference set of ways that things happen in Urbit that are robust both from a user behavior perspective and from an implementation perspective that get reused in as many places as possible. Because if you have, say, 1,000 hours to work on building some application, and you can, if you have to develop every piece of that application at the application level yourself, you're not going to put very much effort in design or implementation into it. But if you've got great libraries that you can reuse in as many places as possible, or services or anything else, you're going to do a lot better.
Yeah, I think that this is an area that more or less I'm really, really pleased that the Urbit Foundation is really taken by the horns in terms of basically taking a lot of immense care, frankly, with the use of cryptography libraries at the very least, and in the use of imports within the runtime, and more or less the limited C and soon to be Rust that is used at that level. On that note, since you did ask about Notchain particularly, at the very least, a single line item on our long security journey is, but one that's going to be one of the more pressing ones, is an audit of the Aries code base itself, which I think, frankly, as far as the Urbit code base goes, Aries is a discrete part. It is in a language that is at least supposed to be safe, or supposed to be able to be made safe more easily, and further, it's at least small enough at this stage that I think it's quite reasonable to start by aiming to get it to a point before you've added all the features and before you've done all of these things, such that you can really start to take a serious mindset toward that very early on.
Another thing that I've seen that works really well is centralizing reporting and anything else around security events across the whole ecosystem. And that might be something where Urbit Foundation funds some organization to do, rather than having each project. It's unrealistic that each project is going to have a full security team, especially if a team is ones or tens of people. So having some of those things shared and more centrally available does make sense. Just to do things around communicating to users about issues, remediation, PR, things like that when something does happen. It's been fairly effective in some projects.
I'll give an optimistic answer. People are building on Urbit because they want to make things that are going to last, and they want to give people things that they can control. And so I think we're actually starting ahead of the curve, with sort of the candidate set of developers, the candidate set of applications that people want to build the way that they're thinking about them. There certainly is much more that can be done sort of in terms of training or even enculturation. It's a very different mindset to write, a daemon that will effectively run forever if you let it, as opposed to, basically any other kind of application. And so, we can do more to teach people what's involved in that way of thinking, but I really believe they'll be open to it, and this would not just be like, wish harder like it would be in, maybe more web-like ecosystems. And I lost my second point, so back to you.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about a problem you run into a lot as a security professional is showcasing why you need security and or especially why should you hire us? Like I work for an audit firm and someone says like there's another audit firm that's cheaper right next door. And it's sort of the same as like if you go to your car mechanic and like, well, there's a guy down the street who will do it like for half the price. And like, how do you know? Because like most people, most users, most app developers might not come from a security background. They don't have a security mindset. And like we do get caught up in a lot of like Dunning-Kruger effect because like, it's really hard to see what the security problems are going to be ahead of time. Because like almost by definition, if you're aware of it, it's almost not a problem because you know how to fix it or you probably know how to avoid it. It's like a battle of unknown unknowns all the time, right? So if you're a non-security person or like if you're working with clients, like how do you, like, especially you, Ryan, like how do you convince them like the utility of a particular security practitioner or like if some team is going to hire a security, like you have a team of 10 people and now you want to hire your first security hire. Like how do you differentiate bad security from good security? Because you can always come in and hand wave and talk about encryption and like maybe convince someone, but like at the end of the day, it's like, it's annoyingly much of an art form, like I think you touched on. Like it's being paranoid and thinking about everything and knowing when to ask a friend and like knowing when to go with your gut kind of thing. So like what's your advice to people like trying to figure out how to like hire a security firm or get your first security hire? Because this is a problem I keep running into. Most people want to go to either the cheapest mechanic or the most expensive mechanic. Like you can print a lot of money by just like being a really good security firm and saying like, well, unless you pay, you don't know what you get. And yeah, what's your advice? Because I keep struggling with this.
Yeah, in practice, most of the time I see it being done by reputation more than anything else. And people say Web3 code audit firms. There are a few that are really well known that are well known for being pretty good, and they get a lot of the business purely on that basis. They may not be experts. Like one of the biggest problems we have as an insurance company is knowing the details, because somebody gets an audit from one of 100 firms, comes to us, wants insurance, and we're not going to tell them, oh, we don't know that firm or we don't trust that firm, so go get another audit, because these are 4 to 5 month backlog to get. They cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to do. So we sort of need to know in advance the things. One of the things that I've discovered is that some firms are really good at certain things and they will only do those things. Other firms are really good at certain things and will do anything that someone brings to them. So it's a more nuanced thing than are they good or bad. It is, are they good or bad at this particular thing, this particular subspecialty, and is the team with it, is their process good? There's almost every one of these companies has a good person or two inside them doing stuff, but what I care about is usually the worst work they'll ever pass. And there are some firms that are really big that have grown really quickly that may not have the best quality control internally. Others that are really big that got really big because they have great quality control. So there's a lot of stuff like that. There's not a good metric for it. Honestly, is someone willing to rely on the audit report to issue you something like an insurance policy, a regulator, or whatever else, is probably the strongest endorsement of a particular form of review. Like, I think we've gotten to the point as in the cryptocurrency industry that smart contract audits are widely accepted as essentially necessary for everything. That was not the case in software itself like 5 or 10 years ago. So that part has been communicated well, but beyond that hasn't really been specialized. There's companies that do tooling-based audits where it's more proof of correctness or otherwise more tooling-based, and some that are more sort of best art practices. And both approaches make sense, and we haven't really decided as an industry what the best requirements are for certain kinds of things. I think there's certain cases where formal methods work incredibly well, a lot of areas where they're just not applicable or where they would not necessarily be the best use of a certain amount of time or money. And we don't really have much of a wide guide for that. I think talk to somebody you trust and see what they would tell you to do is usually what people end up doing. The problem is if you have no background, you don't necessarily know if the person you trust is a good person to trust or not. So.
Would you generally agree?
That brings me to the thing I forgot, actually,
Right.
which is the other piece of vague optimism I wanted to convey, which is the Urbit identity system. The reduced namespace of ships, the fact that everything that is published in the network has provenance, it's attributable to who has published it, and also it should be like, in normal terms, you'll get things from other people who are on the network, right? So there's another dimension of provenance there. And then it should be, very easy to find out other people in your, graph, their opinion of these things.
Doesn't that make you vulnerable to just mimetic warfare then?
Sure, but there's obviously something incredibly hand-wavy when people talk about the Urbit address system and reputation systems and exactly how that will come into focus. But the simple fact of the reduced set and the provenance should even make the sort of vague, social dimension that Ryan's talking about more legible. You can actually bake it into the interface that you use to install applications, and that's not a small thing.
Yeah. I mean, it is even outside of Urbit, just knowing that a lot of projects advertise the smart contract audits they've done and which firms they've used, and then you look 6 months later, if they got popped and they had an audit that covered it and it wasn't found, that is a data point. So looking at that, I have a database of like 1,500 loss events in cryptocurrency, and I mine that for seeing trends and things. Because I really don't fault people for being the first victim of a new class of attack. Like when reentrancy was a thing in Solidity, the first few people that got hit, it's kind of understandable, it sucks, but yeah, whatever. And then the first few times that Oracle attacks happened to people, yeah, also bad for them. But like after like 5 or 10 or 100, it's kind of on them for not catching up. So.
There's a funny aspect of cryptocurrency ecosystems where there's a true Darwinian survival of the fittest in terms of who's even able to continue working. Yeah. And I think that this environment on the one hand is really positive for best practices, and this is one of the primary reasons why we see the fast emergence of better practices for security than we see in the rest of the software industry.
Yeah. There's a built-in bug bounty in every system.
Precisely. On the other hand, I think that it also makes doing anything meaningful significantly more capital intensive, which is kind of this other strange effect in terms of actually entrenching existing parties. And I strongly wonder, or at the very least, I think it's extremely desirable to, regardless of whether it's possible, if it were to be the case that it could be found, some form of a system in which we continue to have this basically fitness function while having drastically more secure defaults. And I can't help but think, personally, at the very least, that we're not going to find it with Solidity.
Cool. We got 15 minutes left, so I want to ask if anyone in the audience has a question. No Q&A so far? No one here said something dumb? Wait, you got a mic coming here.
How does one cultivate an adequate amount of paranoia to be good at security? And good at considering security concerns?
I mean, so a lot of money on the line is usually a good...
Having money on the line is definitely a way to sharpen the mind. So the counterpart of that is that there's good paranoia and bad paranoia. There are a lot of organizations that are bad paranoid because they're afraid of someone stealing credit internally for doing something, all sorts of like dumb internal stuff that is not helpful for a good security culture. And I would say that in the positive environments that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of projects, it's not really paranoia so much as openness internally about open communication, at least internally, communicating problems, communicating risks, trying to measure things, and then a sort of the blame-free process of after action on what things have happened. One of the things that we can learn from other industries. I think aerospace, nuclear engineering, military, anything where there are serious consequences to failure and failure happens on a routine basis. You see a sort of a formalized process of reviewing when bad things have happened and how to learn lessons from them to not repeat them. Because the problem is, outside of very limited parts of the computer industry, people are not learning lessons from when things happen. And that is what takes losses from small to huge and universal. So yeah, I think not so much paranoia, but being very questioning and very open about questioning things, and not having somebody that owns Little's module and you can't really raise questions about it because he'll get angry if you question what happens if this thing happens. That's probably the more positive view for it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And like, one thing I notice with clients, like a really good client is one that comes in and says like, I mean, we think we're pretty secure, but like we assume that we missed something. Like everything has a bug, and like the more you can find, the better. Whereas like sometimes you encounter people in an organization or like an organizational culture where like I own everything, and by God, there's no problem with my stuff. And if there's a problem with my stuff, it's actually someone else's fault. That kind of environment will definitely like give you, well, the bad paranoia and like paranoia is a little voice in your head, and if you have an organization of a lot of people, then like make sure that all those people act as those voices. If someone just has a weird gut feeling, that there's no problem racing it. And then of course, like if you're a solo developer, you can cultivate that yourself as well. Like if you go to bed at night, like after you brush your teeth, you're like, wait, could that happen? Like actually just entertaining the thought is sort of like treating it like as a nice little advisor, and knowing that you'll never be 100% secure goes a long way. Because like once you start feeling like you're supposed to be invincible, then it's really easy to start getting into an ego battle of, well, if I'm not, then who am I? And like, I'm going to be so screwed. Where rather be like, there's definitely something out there, and I'm just going to try to find as much as possible. Yeah.
Another thing that really helps with security and everything else is just having things be simple and maintainable and easily inspectable. It shouldn't be a 6-hour process to rebuild stuff and everything else. It should be relatively painless to do routine tasks and automated to the extent possible.
And I would just add, fluency in the kind of issues and bugs that turn into security problems in your domain. So if you're a C programmer, I don't have to list them, but at different layers of the stack and different kind of projects, there are different kind of primary concerns, and that's the kind of paranoia, awareness of possibly just how thin the ice is that you're on, that sort of thing.
What would you say is the most immediate security concern for Urbit, and if you fixed that, what applications or use cases would that start to open up?
I would take this one at least to start with, and I would say it is trivial to do denial of service attacks. Absolutely trivial. Even before we get into all of the memory bugs and all of the different exploits that I'm sure you can do at the runtime level, that I'm sure you can do at the kernel level, it is so trivially easy to just turn off an Urbit if you just know its name. Like, oh, Master Morzad, it's not going to do any requests from now on. It's going to do my requests forever. It's so cheap, so easy. You could do it probably to the entire network for an extremely cheap amount of money. And this is a problem. It has easy mitigations, at the very least, in terms of being less stupid than maximally, pick your slur. But I would love to hear other thoughts as well.
Yeah, that's a problem in most cryptocurrency or most crypto systems in general. They are designed in a way that is computationally expensive to verify stuff and pretty easy to DOS. I worked for Cloudflare for a while, and I got to see the biggest DOS attacks on the internet, and yeah, it's a much higher bar. So
yeah.
Well, and I'll just tease the networking work that we're doing at the foundation. The next revision of Urbit's networking protocols are from the top down being designed with this concern in mind. There's mitigations. There's work that hasn't been done that would sort of effectively address many of Logan's concerns. There's nothing intrinsic to Urbit that says this must be, trivially DOSable. So yeah, I agree. That's probably the highest priority. As far as I don't know that enables new applications. It enables you to run it with more confidence and start to depend on it, more fully, and it reduces this sort of like. It's not really like falling into a manhole. It's more like you utilize like banana peels all spread all around you or something. I mean, yeah. So I'd go back to the other thing and say it's the user space security model. There's an application sandbox as far as there is a security transition and a clear delineation between kernel space and user space. But user space is homogeneous, and anything in user space is allowed to do anything that user space is allowed to do. And so what that means is either you don't trust your Urbit very much, or you don't run that many apps. And that's a bad place to be. Fixing that, the project I was talking about earlier, enables those things to come together more. You can use your Urbit more seriously. I use my Urbit very seriously. I use it all day for my job. Almost all of my work communication is on it. Many of my notes to myself, the history of design, all kinds of things are on it. I'm very cautious about the applications that I install. I install content from PelDev Industries and maybe a couple other places. But it would be great if there was a sandbox layer that I had confidence in there, and then then I'd install your stuff.
Maybe like what for the other panelists, like what are some of those applications that you would want to see, say, once user space has some of that sandbox in? That
Crypto wallet.
Life better.
I want to be able to put my keys on my Urbit without being extremely paranoid. That's like a reasonable use case.
Proxying other communications in general through Urbit would be great, because realistically, as was said earlier, not everyone you talk to is going to be using Urbit, but I would like to talk to them through Urbit.
I guess also getting more dissidents on. It's a very cozy little community we have right now, but both dissidents that
have a real threat model, yeah.
A Chinese dissident shouldn't be very easily DDoSed by anyone who understands even the basics of Urbit. That's a nice thing. And also if someone comes in and is a dissident of everything on Urbit, I don't want everyone on here to trivially be I'm going to prank that guy and just DDoS him, right?
Yeah, it might be worth talking to the secure drop people or something, some existing application that is used by those people, and see if there's a way to extend it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a word about the sandbox. Can we make a program that will run another program inside it?
Of course.
It's general computation. You're screwed. You're just, yeah.
That's not a problem then.
It depends on what you think of as a problem.
Security transition to be recursive. You need that to not escape the sandbox, or it's not much of a sandbox.
Evo.
Anyone else? Okay, any closing notes? Anything you want to send people off with? A note on optimism, maybe?
I think we're getting better and better tools all the time. Things are undeniably stronger tools today than they were 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. We have cryptography widely deployed on the internet. We have end users that actually are managing keys directly in a reasonable way, which I never thought was possible. We have hardware security deployed on the most common devices that people use, phones, as well as even on computers. We have decent hardware security deployed. But we also have much, much stronger attacks, and we're about to see within 3 years, probably even closer than that, massive amount of insider attacks due to zero knowledge and anonymous payments being available. And it's going to be a very exciting world.
So just to explain that, why why do zero knowledge payments enable that?
Unlinkable transactions.
Yeah, unlinkable transactions. As soon as it is possible to, as an insider at a company, and you're slightly annoyed at your boss, or you discover something in the course of work and you don't think you're getting paid enough, and you can just sell that vulnerability to some outside party who will exploit it, and you are perhaps feeding them information about how to exploit it and what the response is likely to be and how much money the company has and everything else, and it's all done untraceably so that you have no real risk as the bad guy here. It's going to make a very, very interesting world. That's even forgetting the world of people intentionally putting bugs into their code for the purposes of doing this. So, yeah.
I don't think that was a note of optimism.
It's a note of
It started as a note of
Fascinating.
optimism, and then the paranoid voice just started ringing again. What do you think, Joe?
Security against some threat model
We need
for
more-
some specific set of applications is possible.
Verifiable
Believe.
computation is powerful and is a distinct way of being able to introduce trust in a trustless environment for particular computations that you already trust. Big caveats. But powerful primitive, basically undeployed. In my opinion, we're very close to the edge of this precipice that's going to see unlocks on the basically cryptography use case front that look basically like almost a new Cambrian explosion in the same way that hash functions unlocked just insane levels of use cases, except this is far more generic, which things being generic, Lord help us. I mean, this is what you want in a computational context.
It is ironic that the same tool that's useful for making attackers' lives much easier is also the useful tool for defenders.
Yeah, no, what a world.
Ultimate dual use. Unironically, though, we have a straightforward path to getting rid of the biggest known issues with Urbit and getting into a quite reasonable place, and that being a springboard to the kind of general sense of confidence across the system, growing over time by making things simpler and simpler, cleaner and cleaner. But the biggest things are these two things I keep harping on, and those fixes are either designed, implemented, somewhere in between. This is not hypothetical in any sense.
I was like, just remember, security isn't an afterthought, and we kid about being super paranoid, but it's actually kind of fun. It's a little bit of playing a game. You can do it with yourself. You build an app, and then you start thinking how can I break it? Can I give it to my buddy, and he can try to break it, and he will give me something to look at and try to break. And I think I'm not speaking for the foundation, but I assume it's very encouraged. Try and go and break Urbit and tell them how you did it. It's just
absolutely
just go at it. I think we do have a culture like that. A paranoid culture of it's perfectly fine to go hey, I can totally break this thing, and here's how I did it, and you'll probably get a pat on the shoulder and get to explain it at the next assembly probably. So go forth and break things, and
yeah.
That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.